Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Ed Bell, Chair of the Audit Committee. Welcome to this remote meeting taking place on the 25th of February 2021 and has been recorded live to the Council's website and will be available to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. Please be aware that any footage from the meeting can be used in subsequent media broadcasts. I would like to give a warm welcome to members, officers and any members of the public or media who are watching this live feed of the meeting. Before I commence with the formal business on the agenda, I would like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for all of us to follow. All participants must mute their microphone. To speak, use the chat function on the right-hand side, type RTS, request to speak. Remember, everyone in the meeting can see the message in the chat function. When invited to speak by the chair, remember to unmute your microphone. Once invited to speak, please introduce yourself with your name and position, unless you have already introduced yourself earlier in the meeting. If you are having issues with connectivity, try switching off your video and use just the telephone function. If connectivity issues continue, you may have to leave the meeting and rejoin to get a better signal. If the chair's connection is lost, the vice chair will take over until my connection is restored. Okay, we'll start the meeting with item 1 on the agenda, which is the apologies for absence. And can I ask Jill Errington if there are any apologies have been received, please?
Chair, we've had apologies from Councillors Colin Carr, June Clark and Bill Kellett. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda are the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of November 2020. These begin on page 5 of our papers. Can I ask if anyone has any questions or comments in relation to the minutes provided to put RTS in the chat function?
Move the minutes, Chairman.
Can I ask for a mover? Is there a seconder of these? I've got a mover with John Shuttleworth. Is there a seconder?
Second, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Item 2. No. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? None. Thank you. Can we move on to item 4, which is an opportunity for the committee to meet Alan Patkinson, the Council's Corporate Director of Neighbourhoods and Climate Change. I would like to welcome Alan to this meeting and ask him to give members an overview of the main activities that his role as Corporate Director of Neighbourhoods and Climate Change covers. Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to come and meet the committee, which is great. I think on a personal level, Chair, I've been at the County Council for more than 10 years now, and I think I've probably come across and had dealings with most of the people around the screen at the minute at one point or another in one role or another. So very nice to meet you in my new role. I've done a number of different things at the council, as people will recall. I started off here about 11 years ago looking at the waste management contracts, and that took me into the neighbourhoods team when Terry Collins was director. Into a bit more of a corporate role as well, looking at project management and customer service, which then took me in 2017 into digital and customer services as part of resources, which is the service I was running up until taking up this role in early 2020. So I've been around the council for a while, and now hopefully I've met people in the committee in the old days when we used to meet face to face, and hopefully I'll be familiar to most people. Really, for me, it's absolutely great to be taking on this role of Corporate Director of Neighbourhoods and Climate Change. It's a fantastic role. In many ways, takes me back to my core speciality of waste management and environmental management. So I'm really pleased to have it. I'll give you a quick overview of how neighbourhoods and climate change is configured now. It's slightly different to the old neighbourhoods team. I've got 4 main areas in my directorate with 4 different heads of service. So the first one I've got is community protection, and that's Joanne Waller as head of service, as many of you will know. Traditionally, the speciality there has been environmental health, consumer protection, licensing, taxi licensing. But of course, over the last year, that service has really been on the front line of COVID enforcement for us, because that trading standards element and the licensing element has really been on the front line of giving advice, guidance, and ultimately enforcement to businesses around the county under the new COVID regulations. So the last 12 months has really brought that team absolutely to the forefront of what we've been doing on the front line. Just on that very quickly, I know I haven't got very long, but across County Durham, just to let members know, business compliance on COVID regulations has on the whole been absolutely brilliant. It's been excellent. Businesses have tried their very best to comply with the regulations, which have been confusing at times. And the main role of that team has been to give advice, help and guidance. The enforcement activities that we've had to take, some of which have been in the press, and there was one just yesterday with a gym that was in the press that we had to take enforcement action, have been very few and far between. And for the most part, businesses in County Durham have really tried their best. It's been really good to see across the last 12 months. So that's community protection. Probably the biggest area in my team is the environment team. Head of service there is Oliver Sherritt, who I'm sure many members around this committee will know. Many of the frontline services there, the 2 biggest services there, refuse, recycling and collection and disposal, and our clean and green teams. Also in that team, we do have a number of other teams, smaller services such as the allotment service, bereavement services, neighbourhood wardens team, a part of Oliver's team, and also fleet are in there as well. And also really coming to the fore in that team is our environment and design team. That team are on the forefront of our climate change activities. So that's our carbon management team and our energy management team. And members will recall that about a year ago now, in fact, exactly a year ago, we brought that climate emergency response plan to Cabinet. That was fully funded with some specific targets in there. We'll be bringing a 1-year update on that climate change emergency response plan very shortly into Cabinet, so members will be able to see the progress that has been made over the last 12 months. An unusual 12 months, of course, it's been, especially for those sort of issues. The other areas I've got technical services, which is now currently, principally engaged in highway services, highway maintenance, strategic highways, bridge maintenance, street lighting, drainage issues, and more recently we've taken the public rights of way team into that team, which makes a whole lot of sense around managing our transport assets, whether that be for vehicles, cycling or pedestrians. Of course, that team has also been very busy over the last 3 months with winter maintenance. As many members will be aware, it's been an exceedingly challenging winter season for us. I'm sitting here now looking out the window at blue skies and warm temperatures, and it feels like the winter weather that we had just a few days ago really feels like long history. And hopefully, I know Paul's in the room, so Paul Darby, so hopefully for our budgets, that bad weather will have passed now. Finally, in neighbourhoods and climate change, we have the partnerships and community engagement team, which were previously in transformation partnerships, but it makes a whole lot of sense for that team to be part of neighbourhoods. A large part of that work is around managing and supporting the AAPs, and those AAPs are heavily involved in doing work in our communities, in our localities and in our neighbourhoods. So it makes sense for that team to be part of neighbourhoods. As well as the AAPs, that also in that team, we have partnership support for many of our County Durham, not only the County Durham partnership, but many of our strategic and many of our statutory partnerships as well. We also look after asylum seekers and resettlement schemes through that team. And also another team that's really come to the fore over the last 12 months is our civil contingencies unit in that team, which has been looking after emergency planning. And who would have thought that we'd be in a state of emergency for nearly 12 months now. So that team has really been at the middle of our Resilience Forum activity and our strategic planning for the COVID outbreak. Head of service there is Gordon Elliott. I meant to say actually with technical services, highway services, we currently have a vacancy at head of service level, and we will be recruiting into that role very shortly. So in terms of the size of the team, in neighbourhoods and climate change, we have an expenditure budget of about 195 million, which is offset by about 80 to 90 million pounds worth of income, which gives us a net budget of 110. We have 1,500 staff in the team, and 1,000 of those staff are in the environment team, engaged on those really large services of refuse, recycling and clean and green. I know I haven't got very long. I don't want to take up all your committee time. I know you've got a heavy agenda. I'll just highlight a couple of big issues, I think, for us going forwards in neighbourhoods and climate change. Firstly, still front and centre of everything that we're doing is our COVID response. We're now looking at the roadmap that was issued by central government the other day and seeing how that applies to our services. Although we've managed to deliver many of our services through COVID, almost as they would have been normally, in the background to maintain social distancing and to maintain safe operating practices, that has really resulted in some really different ways of working, which have amassed some costs to them as well. So we now have to think about how do we take those services back to normal. Some examples of that, big examples for us are refuse and recycling collections, where normally we would have had 3 people in a cab for the whole round. We've tried to minimise the amount of time that we have the 3 people together in a cab to help with social distancing. And of course, our recycling centres have not been working at full capacity for the last 12 months to maintain social distancing and help social distancing amongst customers. And that's had a cost and an implication too. Other big issues for us, I think, obviously the climate change agenda is really important for us. And we will be, bringing that to the fore as much as we possibly can. We have our 2-year plan, our 2-year costed plan, and now we're really starting to look at what happens after that. Where do we go next, and how do we meet our climate change ambitions as a council? To go back to where I started in the authority, our waste management and our waste disposal contracts are now up for renewal. So that starts to date me a little bit, and there's an awful lot of work to be done on those. Not only the biggest contract that we have, which is the residual waste, but also our waste contracts around recycling and the operation of our recycling centres as well. And just finally, a big issue for us at the minute is we've got some significant bridge works going on. As members will be aware, New Elva Bridge in Durham City is still closed, but that project is going on schedule with very little in the way of delays through COVID. We've recently reopened Witton Park Bridge, which was closed for some time, but we also have Walton Bridge closed, which is a different proposition altogether, much smaller bridge, but very historically valuable and a real piece of County Durham heritage. So we've got a project ongoing around that. So that's really sensitive, really high profile, and something that we need to get right for the county as well. So, Chair, that's a whistle-stop tour. I hope I haven't covered too much too quickly there, but very happy to take any questions that might come up.
I think what we're going to do, Alan, is just leave it like that. Thanks for the overview, but can I just tell you that this is a very, very inquisitive audit committee, and we will be checking with the effectiveness of what you actually do and what internal control arrangements are in place, and we will adjudge those and ensure that we get our fair share of inquiries dealt with in a proper and timely manner. So, Alan, thanks very much for your update, and I'll let you get back to your busy schedule because we've got a big schedule to get on with today. But nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
And it would be remiss of me if I didn't welcome Clive Robinson into the meeting. He's just come, so welcome, Clive. And can we move into item 5, which is the Q3 health and safety wellbeing performance? And Kevin, I think you're going to take this. Kevin Lough.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kevin Lough. I'm Durham County Council's Occupational Health and Safety Manager. I'm just presenting the Q3 health, safety and wellbeing report to the committee today. I don't know whether Jill, is the report coming up on the screen?
No, Chair, I understood there were no presentations
Right, okay,
this morning.
just happy to talk through the main contents of the report. Is that okay, Chair?
Yeah, and members will ask questions if need be. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So on the report, just some of the key highlights on there. Obviously, we've provided some infographics at the start of the report. Some of the key issues on there, a number of accidents that remain lower than normal. That would be expected, primarily impacted by lots of people working at home and working differently, and that's had an impact in a reduction on our overall accidents. Lots of numbers in terms of COVID testing requests, so nearly 340 during the quarter, with 120 tests provided, because those people are screened and triaged before the test is took. Again, some of the fire-related incidents we'll cover in the report. There was over 800 contacts within our occupational health service around COVID-related matters, a high number of contacts from our employees, which is really positive that they're seeking advice and seeking support, and as a support service, our occupational health colleagues are providing that level of support. So some key things there in terms of the infographics on page 3. In terms of page 4 of the report, this was a really testing time in terms of Q3 around COVID. We went through a phase of some tiered restrictions from the government and also some lockdown arrangements as well. And throughout all of that, the council, in terms of advice and things like support and services and risk assessments, etc., were changing constantly. So again, a lot of work undertaken to make sure we're working safely. We were in line with the latest guidance, whatever that was at the time, and a lot of work around that. Again, just to say there was nearly 350 people screened through occupational health, and there's some figures there in terms of how many were tested and how many came back as positive. The asymptomatic spread of the coronavirus, again, there was some emerging evidence at the time about 1 in 3 people being asymptomatic, so the council did proactively revise their approach to wearing of face coverings in workplaces and indoor workplaces, things like vehicles, etc. And there was some guidance issued to employees across the council in terms of that, again, as an additional control measure in response to some of the public health information and guidance that was coming out. We did do some audit and assurance checks across our council buildings. So there was 34 assurance audits undertook across the sites, which were mainly used with higher levels of footfall. And again, a really positive response and return there in terms of levels of compliance overall. And I've just highlighted some of the areas where we spotted some opportunities for improvement and looked at improving those. During the quarter, moving on to page 5 and 6 of the report, there were 6 fire-related incidents. The incidents are stated there. I'll not go through them in massive detail. There was no injuries to persons or people. There was some property damage. And again, we've investigated every one of those very thoroughly, worked with the fire and rescue service where necessary, and we've implemented control measures to prevent reoccurrence in all of those situations. In terms of HSE inspectors undertook inspections of a handful of our schools across the county. The council maintains schools, looking at really risk assessments for COVID in particular, control measures on the site at the time, and they were really positive about our approach and compliance levels. They were really complimentary about the control measures that the council had put in place, the support and guidance that had been provided, and the outcome of those was really positive, and there was no action. So that again, for us, for that sort of enforcement feedback was really good, to know that we were doing everything we possibly could. In terms of open water safety, the City Safety Group, which is chaired by Alan Patrickson, who's just presented there, we did a lot of work during that particular quarter on the Freshers Week, or Student Induction Week as it's known now, and there was a separate group really focusing on that. A partnership approach was taken with the police, the university, the council, licensing teams, to really look at how we maintain student safety, in particular upon return to university. And again, we had a rule of 6 at the time that was changed, and we were sort of moving with a movable object in terms of legislation and the government guidance. But safe to say that went well. We put things in place, and that's detailed in the report there. In terms of employee health and wellbeing, the council achieved the Continuing Excellence Better Health at Work Award, which was extremely positive. And again, I've just detailed some of the things there. The assessors that are external assessors did comment that the council had been really proactive and rapid in terms of making changes around COVID, supporting employees across the organisation with various interventions and incentives and communication. So again, we achieved that award in the middle of the pandemic. Used lots of the evidence that we'd done throughout the pandemic and towards the award, and that went really well. And that was the updated award status for the council, which is really positive. In terms of occupational health service, again, I've put in lots of statistics, all of the throughput through occupational health. There's a lot of numbers on there in terms of we're still providing business as usual stuff. So things like physiotherapy, counselling, that is normal anyway. But on top of that, we've got COVID-related concerns and queries, financial support, bereavement support. So we've got a whole range of support measures there, and that just gives an indication of the usage through occupational health during the quarter. And again, for COVID-specific activity, on page 14, there's a table there, and that's the details the number of queries come through occupational health, the number of people that were screened through occupational health. And the Occupational Health Service continue to work in partnership with County Durham and Dalton Foundation Trust to provide employee testing in terms of the PCR tests for COVID. And obviously more in recent times, we've launched some of the lateral flow device testing schemes as well. So basically, in terms of the last bit of the report, there's some information about the council's potentially violent persons register, and our risk and assurance colleagues kindly provided the health and safety strategic risk table, which is in the latter part of the report. And those are the key points, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Have any members got any questions? Can you use the type here? Clive? Can I ask Clive? Is it you, Clive? Sorry, Owen, sorry.
That's okay, thanks, Chair.
Glasses.
I just wondered, Kevin, obviously, we have a slightly biased view of this. A lot of the people we deal with are now working from home, and I guess quite a lot of the council staff are working from home. I wondered, I looked at your infographic and I looked at the psychological work-related incidents, and I wondered whether you're seeing an uptick in that, or it's level, or whether it's even dropping. Because clearly on a lot of the outward facing things, we've got a report that accidents and incidents are down, but on the psychological work related incidents, do you know whether that is improving or worsening in the current COVID environment?
Yeah, the statistics are showing that they've actually decreased, and these are work related psychological incidents that will be reported. So our statistics indicate, like accidents, they've actually decreased. We think, again, this needs to be reviewed in the round when we get to the end of this and start looking at, obviously we think the impact on accidents is reduced because of homework and people aren't in workplaces. And psychological reports, there's a school of thought which would say there's a psychological impact, detrimental impact because of the way we're working, but actually there's a positive impact as well in terms of lots of people are embracing homework and that work-life balance in terms of things like childcare and not travelling to work in the winter and the cold. And there's actually there's a school of thought which says there's lots of positives to take from this, but overall we've seen a reduction in work-related psychological ill health, and I think this does lend itself to some further investigations and fully understanding as part of a review about homework and different ways of working, and what we've learned from this period is to understand why a bit more, and I think that's a piece of work that we need to do, but certainly a reduction is shown at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. I was thinking that perhaps we needed to do that review because we're now looking at our work practices for the future as well as the past. So thank you for that, Kevin.
Thanks, Owen. Any more? I've got nobody down to ask us. Kevin, can I just ask one little item that sort of concerns me a little bit? Here over at Seaham, we have a lot of people going into the sea in icy cold weather, and I appreciate that the sea water is a lot warmer than the river water. Are any advice messages given out to these groups of people who go into the sea, and the same at various points in the river? Because it seems to be an increased phenomena that I can see, that we have many people going into the sea, and it's on TV quite a lot. Has this been given any thought in depth?
Yeah, I mean, these groups are, there is safety messages and work done with these groups from organisations nationally, such as ROSPA and the Royal Life Saving Society, and particularly around cold water shock, which we know within County Durham has tragically taken some young lives in County Durham. So there has previously, and there is ongoing work, and they are as part of the communications loop about, you know, one of the key control measures is easing yourself into cold water. It's that shock. So steadily going in, and obviously the sea would lend itself to that. Things like wearing wetsuits and other measures as well. But I am aware that these organisations are privy to and see lots of these safety messages through the national organisations that they will be linking with.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Maybe it might be a suggestion that the Audit Committee actually get some wetsuits and come down to Seaham Beach. Thanks very much, Kevin. No more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move on to item 6, which is change to the codes of practice for local accounting? And I think, Beverly, you're taking this, mate.
Yes. Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'm Beverly White. I'm a finance manager for the council, responsible for revenue, pensions and technical accounting. So as members of this committee will know, we closely follow the latest CITFA code of practice on local authority accounting when compiling the annual statement of accounts. This report highlights the main changes to the code which impact on the way we need to prepare the 2021 accounts in comparison to last year's accounts preparation. The good news for us staff is that there's no material change to the way we have to compile this year's accounts. The changes to the code are only minor and are set out in Appendix 2 to this report. At September's Audit Committee meeting, I provided members with an update on the conclusions drawn by Sir Redmond in his review of the effectiveness of local audit and transparency of local authority financial reporting. I also said we would keep members of this committee informed of developments as we became aware of them. The only change so far that we're aware of resulting from this review is that the deadline for authorisation of the final set of accounts will be the 30th of September for 2021 and 21-22. This is a trial basis to see if the 2 months extension to the audit period improves the audit completion rate across the UK. We weren't sure whether we would also get an extension from the 31st of May deadline for completion of the draft accounts, but up until now there's been no confirmation of that. However, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government is presently seeking views from all local authorities regarding the possibility of pushing back the publication date for the draft accounts from the existing 31st of May deadline to the 1st of August. So we may yet be advised of a change to this deadline. A recent change to legislation means that we are no longer able to hold a negative dedicated skills grant reserve balance as an earmarked reserve, which we have done for the last 2 year ends. Instead, we must transfer the balance to a new unusable reserve, which will be used solely for the purpose of recognising deficits in respect of skills budgets. Now, this change should satisfy our external auditors who didn't feel it was appropriate for us, or any other council for that matter, to set a negative earmark reserve, and have stated so in their last 2 audit completion reports. At the 31st of March 2021, we are forecasting that the high needs DSG block will have a deficit balance, which we'll need to transfer out of an earmark reserve and account for instead in a new unusable reserve. This change to the way we have to account for the negative reserve, however, will not impact on the 5-year plan that was approved by Cabinet in January 2020 to recover the deficit by the end of the 5-year period of the plan. IFRS 16 will change the way the council accounts for leases, and it was originally due to be adopted in 2021 accounts, but it's been deferred until 2022-23 now. However, officers continue to prepare for this implementation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask members if they're happy to note the changes detailed in the report as per the recommendation?
Move the report, Chairman.
All agreed? Thank you. Thank you, Beverly. And I think you straight into item 7, which is agreement of accounting policies.
Yes, thanks, Chair. As there have been only minor changes to the SIPFA Code of Practice for 2021, we aren't proposing any changes to the accounting policies we applied in the preparation of our 1920 accounts, because they remain appropriate for use in the preparation of this year's accounts. Members can see the full list of accounting policies we intend to apply in the preparation of the 2021 Statement of Accounts detailed in Appendix 2. So I just want to ask members to approve the use of these accounting policies in the preparation of this year's financial statements and authorise the Corporate Director of Resources to review the accounting policies as we go through the final accounts process, reporting any changes to the Audit Committee meeting that follows. Thanks, Chair.
Move the report, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got no questions. Can you go into item 8, Beverly?
Will do, thank you. So this report provides information regarding the final accounts timetable for 2020-21. It sets out the key tasks and target dates for their completion to enable the production of the accounts in line with statutory deadlines. The timetable is also a tool to help us manage and monitor progress towards closing the accounts. Like last year, there is a possibility that the statutory deadlines may be extended due to the impact of the coronavirus pandemic and also due to the government's recent consultation regarding the timing of publication of the draft accounts. However, for now, the two key dates we need to work towards are the 31st of May, which is currently the date by which the Corporate Director of Resources should certify the draft accounts, and the 30th of September being the deadline for the Audit Committee to approve the final or audited set of accounts. So in compiling the timetable, all relevant officers have had the opportunity to contribute and agree that the deadlines relevant to themselves and their teams are attainable. Appendix 2 to this report sets out the key dates for members to note, but as you'd imagine, the actual timetable referred to by our officers throughout the final accounts process is in much more detail than this. Throughout the final accounts period, officers in my team will closely monitor the achievement of deadlines set out in the timetable. Weekly reminders by way of emails will be sent to relevant officers in advance of tasks due to be completed the following week. We also ask to be notified of any potential issues in achieving deadlines as soon as they come to light, in order that we can remain on track and meet the statutory deadlines. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Beverly. Can we approve that report?
Move the report, Chairman.
Thank you. Can we go on to the external, no, the internal, external accounts, please. Item 9, external audit letter. Are you taking this, Mark, or is James?
I'll take this, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, I'm Mark Kirkham, partner with Mazar, with the County Council's external auditors. Item 9 on the agenda for today's meeting is the annual letter, which is a retrospective look at the work that we did in 2019-20. Because we report the findings, and the findings were discussed in detail by meeting of this committee in September, I don't propose to revisit all of those findings. I will draw the committee's attention to the parts of the letter that include new messages and new observations, and they are at part 5 and 6, where we set out the fees for the work that we carried out last year. So that's finalising that conversation that we had with the County Council in connection with the 1920 work, and at part 6, the forward look part of the annual letter, where we refer briefly to aspects of the financial outlook and some of the operational challenges that the County Council faces as it continues to help communities in dealing with the impact of the public health emergency. The other parts of the forward look refer to changes in the code of practice, which are referred to in items 10 and 11 on your agenda, which are the audit plans for the current financial year. So I don't propose to go into the key changes there, which affect our value for money work. And the other part of the forward look refers to the Redmond review, the findings of which were considered by the meeting of this committee in, I think it was September, it may have been November, Chair, but those findings have already been considered. I am happy to take any questions or comments on that item 9 on the agenda, Chair.
Have members got any questions? I've got one here from, who's that? Sorry, my screen's gone off. Wait a minute. Is that Clive?
It's from myself, Chair. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Just a question from on the value for money. It's obviously something that we try and concentrate on, and it's tricky to get a definitive answer on that just because of the nature of it. But around the COVID responses and the funds that have been sort of spent and allocated to the council and spent around COVID, is there anything in terms of VFM that you're looking at specifically in this year?
Thank you for the question. Both VFM and the regularity aspects of the monies that were dispersed in response to the emergency, they will be considered as part of the audit for 2021. They form a key and unusual part of the County Council's agenda, and that's because you and the other local authorities went into response mode, and so that will form part of our risk assessment, and that won't lead to any separate opinion because we haven't been, we're not at this stage required to do a separately commissioned piece of work, so we'll consider it as part of our normal and routine audit procedures.
Good, thank you, Mark.
Are you happy with that, Clive?
Yeah, no, it's fine. And as Mark says, it's unusual and it's different, but at least we're recognising it within the scope of the audit activity. I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Councillor John Shuttleworth, you've got a
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Just an observation as opposed to anything else. On page 95, there's a comment made about from the year 2019-20 that 5 members hadn't filled the declarations of interest form in. I just wondered, you know, why is that? I mean, we all get these things, and usually, certainly when I get them within a few days, these things are all done, be it pension fund, audit committee, or any other committee for that matter, you know.
I don't think we can comment on that, but that's a question that can be put forward through maybe Paul Darby to take up and investigate. And funnily enough, we've got Paul Darby who's going to come on next to speak. Paul?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. I'm Paul Darby, I'm the Corporate Director of Resources. Just picking up on the previous comment around the assurance on the various business rates, grants and the costs and whatever incurred linked to COVID. On where there's specific government grant funding provided for things like the business rates grant schemes and what have you, there's a whole assurance process, post-payment assurance process that sits around that, and there's an awful lot of work that that Stephen's team does around some of that post-payment assurance and sort of that link into our VFM considerations as part of the final accounts, and there's a whole VFM assessment that we'll do as part of the close down this year, and seek assurance in many respects from Stephen and his team around the arrangements that have sat on some of those procurement decisions, on some of those schemes we've been administering on behalf of the government, just to give the committee the assurance that there is work being undertaken in that area and independent of the people who are administering those schemes and incurring those costs through Stephen's team. Picking up on Councillor Shuttleworth's comment, I can't sort of comment why the individual members didn't complete. those. All I can sort of give the committee assurance that that all members are requested to complete the declarations of interest, and as part of the close down this year, we'll make sure that we pursue those to make sure that we do have a full set of them for the close down this time. It's up to individual members to complete those, and through the process for us to make sure they're requested and chased up to make sure that they're available for Mark and the team, as well as to be publicly available anyway. So it'll be not for the lack of trying to get those completed.
Okay, John, are you all right with that?
Yeah, that's fine, Chairman. On that, I'll move the report. Thank you.
Yeah. Are members happy to note the information contained in the report? Yeah. Thank you. Can we move on to item 10, the external audit, County Durham Council's audit strategy? And I think James Collins is going to present this report. Is that right?
Yes, Chair. So I'm James Collins. I'm a senior manager with Mazar, the council's external auditor. So Mark is just taken us through the report, which concludes the 1920, and we move straight into the 2021 external audit. So the audit strategy memorandum on the agenda is the plan, essentially, for the 2021 financial year. So I'll just take you through the key parts of the report. So section 1 details our responsibilities, which are primarily around the audit opinion and also the value for money work, which Mark has alluded to has changed this year in terms of the scope of that work, but also our additional responsibilities around going concern, consideration of fraud, and our reporting to the National Audit Office. Section 3 covers the audit scope and approach and the timetable, so it fits in with the report that was previously presented in terms of the timescales for the audit work, so built around the expectation that the audit will take place between June and September, meeting those deadlines. Section 4 details the significant risks and key areas of management judgment that we've identified as part of the audit. There are no significant changes to those in comparison to the 1920 audit, so I'm not proposing to go through those in any detail, but I'm happy to take any questions at a later date. Section 5 gives a summary of our responsibilities for value for money work, in particular the impact of the change in the Code of Audit Practice, and the fact that we are no longer giving a conclusion, but more reporting by exception. And it also provides a bit of detail about the reporting that the external auditor is expected to provide. So in our auditor's annual report, highlighting any significant weaknesses that we've identified or recommendations, or any emerging issues or matters that we've identified in our work. So there's a lot. It might seem a small change, but there's a lot more work involved in value for money going forward. Section 6 details the audit fees, and Section 7 details the independence. So independence is obviously very important for your external auditor. We have highlighted some areas where there may be a perceived threat, but we've detailed the safeguards and the procedures that are in place to mitigate those threats. Section 8 details materiality and the materiality levels that we report to, but also the triviality threshold that we work to, and the matters that will be reported to the Audit Committee that we identify in our audit work. So I'll pause there and happy to take any questions that members may have.
Have members got any questions of James up to now? And I've got one, I think. Councillor Shuttleworth, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I know I've mentioned this over the last 2 or 3 years, really, but in terms of item 4 and the valuation of property and plant and equipment, do we feel we've got the right people in place now, so we don't see any more resurrections of such as Windleston Hall and that?
That's probably one for officers to answer. I mean, in terms of our work, very much looking at the process and procedures in place to ensure that the valuations are in line with the requirements of the code of practice. We have raised issues in previous years, not as many last year, but it's obviously a big number on the council's balance sheet, so it is an area of particular attention and focus of our work.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
I think I've got Ian Rudd wanting to come in, but I think Paul, I'll bring you in first and see if there's any update there, and I'll bring Ian in.
Yeah, just to give them the committee some comfort. We do have a head of corporate property and land, Susan Robinson, and her team sort of have the valuation team as part of that. So we work closely with them in terms of the valuation. So they follow all of the proper guidance, the proper professional standards. So I'm confident that they'll value everything as it should be, in line with all of the appropriate regulations and sort of their best practice. So from my side, from Section 151 perspective, we've got a dedicated team with the necessary skills, and they work closely with Beverly and her team in terms of providing the valuations we need for the capital accounting.
Does that give you some assurance, John?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, goes back a long way. Can I bring in Ian Rudd, please?
Yes, hello there. It's Ian Rudd, a cooperative member. I was just a question on page 129 about the fees. I was just obviously there's got to be a lot more work involved, or potentially more work involved, but the little note 3 refers to the impact of the core audits will be at least 10% or 20% or £10,000 rather, or 20% of the final audit fee. Now the audit fee was actually about 200,000, so 20% of that would be 40,000 according to my calculation. So is the extra fee somewhere between 10 and 40,000 then? Is that what you're saying?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take that. We haven't put a precise number on that part of the fee because this is the first year that our new requirements under the National Audit Office's new code of practice come into play. So effectively at this stage, we think it's only fair that we flag up the need for us to do additional work and the extra cost that could potentially attract. So until we carry out the procedures for the first time, and until we complete the narrative report, which is the key difference in how we will be closing our audit for 2021, we can't say what that work and that reporting duty will cost. So we've put that estimate in to make sure that people are aware that there will be more work involved and that there'll be more fee as a consequence. So that's why there's that range. It's because there's a level of uncertainty about the volume of work that's involved.
All right, but it's going to be at least 10,000, but possibly more. Then is what you're saying?
That's correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Very great question to take some comfort from. I'm sure we'll keep an eye on this within the Audit Committee. Thanks, Mark. Are members happy to note the information contained in this report?
Move it, Chairman.
Thank you. Can we move on to item 11, which again is the external Durham Pension Fund audit strategy, and I think Daniel Ray is going to take this. Is that right, Daniel?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Daniel Ray. I am the audit manager of the pension fund at Mazar. And the document we have here on the agenda is our audit plan for the pension fund side of things for 2021, and it follows exactly the same format as the report that James has just presented for the council audit. So I'll just do the same thing in terms of taking you through the key points of the report. So section 1 sets out our responsibilities for the audit. There are some slight differences from the council responsibilities in that we don't have a VFM conclusion and we don't have any reporting to the National Audit Office, but we do have a consistency report where we give an opinion on whether the consistency of the financial statements within the pension fund's annual report are consistent with the pension fund financial statements in the wider council accounts. So those are the only differences in that respect. And then section 3, in terms of our audit approach and timeline, very similar to the plan we're trying to follow for the council audit. So our planning work's ongoing at the minute. We anticipate completing most of the field work in June and July, and then being in a position to report at the same time as the council in September. Section 4 for significant risks, similar position to the council in that we don't have any changes to the significant risks that we had for the previous year. For section 5, again, this just sets out our fees for the 2021 audit. Section 6 has a similar section to what was in the council report in terms of our commitment to independence and stressing the importance of that in as our position as external auditors. And section 7 again sets out our approach to materiality and the initial thresholds that we have in place at the planning stage. And that's probably the key points for that report. So again, we'll be happy to take any questions on that.
Have any members got any questions, or are we happy to note the report and the information from Daniel?
Move the report, Chairman.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Can we move on to item 12, which is the corporate governance review? And can I ask Kevin Roberts to present this report, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this report informs Audit Committee of the key dates in the annual governance review for the 2021 financial year to enable the statutory deadline to be achieved for approving the final accounts. The governance review informs the annual governance statement in the statement of accounts, so the actions in Appendix 2 of this report align with the final accounts table, which was covered in item 8 of today's agenda, noting that there are some dates which are subject to confirmation, and the Audit Committee is simply asked to note these dates.
Okay, thank you. Short and sweet, Kevin. Thanks very much. Are members agreed to note these dates?
Yeah, move it, Chairman.
Thank you. Can we move on to item 13, which is the annual government statement? And can I ask Kevin Roberts to present the report, please?
Thank you. Right, the annual governance statement for the 2019-2020 financial year included 6 improvement actions to strengthen the Council's corporate governance arrangements. Updates on these actions will be included as usual in the AGS for 2021, which will be presented to Audit Committee later this year. In the meantime, services have been asked to provide an interim update for each action, and I'm pleased to say that 3 of these are complete, 2 are on target, and the target date for one of the actions has been put back from March 2021 to December 2021. The full updates can be found in Appendix 2 of this report. So while I'm happy to take questions on any of the actions, I thought it would be appropriate to focus on action 2, which is the action that has been deferred. So yeah, action 2 concerns the arrangements for management and use of assets, specifically the corporate landlord model, which is being implemented through the new Corporate Property and Land Service. And while the pandemic has hit services right across the board, I think this area was particularly sensitive because of the amount of work needed to make strategic offices, public-facing buildings and other buildings COVID secure. The head of service now expects the new arrangements covered by the action to be embedded by the end of this year, so that's the 2021 calendar year. Okay, so that's as much as I was going to say, Chair, but if there are any questions, happy to take them.
Yeah, we appreciate the times we're in, and but it's great to see that we are catching up. Are members happy to note the information given by Kevin, and that improvement in progress has been made per the
report, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Can I go on to item 14, which is the Strategic Risk Management Progress Report? And can I ask Dave Marshall to present this report, please? And if anybody has any questions or comments for Dave, please put RTS in the chat function. Okay, over to you, David.
Thank you, Chair. David Marshall, Risk Manager for the County Council. This is the periodic Strategic Risk Management Progress Report that we bring to 3 times a year to committee. I think in many ways the report is self-explanatory, and so I wasn't going to go through it line by line, but basically I just wanted to take you to pages 190 and 191, which highlight the changes that have occurred since the last report, and primarily we've had one risk closed, which was the with regard to the County Durham plan. As you know, that has been now fully adopted by full council on the 21st of October 2020, so really that risk has disappeared. Another issue and risk which has changed slightly is the one of with regard to the Mountset crematorium and the replacement of the 2 cremators there. It was planned to take place and be completed by March 2021. Unfortunately, due to COVID, international travel restrictions and the like, it's meant that really they're going to have to be delayed until later in the year. So the temporary cremator, which is in there, it was installed in July last year, is still in operation, and things seem to be okay at the moment. I mean, there has been, to try and speed things up, we understand there has been work done in Germany where the cremators are being developed and brought over from. There's been work done there to try and do some of the work that they would have done in Mountset over there to try and reduce the timescales that we'll need once the international restrictions are lifted. And in terms of the EU, as you know, we've had Brexit on there for a lot of years, a long time, because of the uncertainty of whether we were going to get a deal or whatever. But now the deal has been agreed, we've really we've moved into a phase of actually just trying to make sure that there are no adverse effects on the local economy, the safety and welfare of the county, and if they are, that we can mitigate those as best as we can in terms of moving forward. Really don't want to go through anything, I think, any further in the report in detail, but happy to take any questions from members on that report.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Owen Temple who wishes to speak. Over to you, Owen.
Thank you, Chair. David, obviously, since I brought the matter to full council and have subsequently been to the Cabinet about it because I perceive it as a risk, I thought I would bring it up with you because I don't see it anywhere on the risk registers. That is in relation to the Milburn Gate development, which, as you will be aware, the council is taking £120 million head lease on, which is to be met from the rents of the occupants of it. Because we signed this contract before COVID, I feel quite strongly that there must be a significantly changed risk on that project. And it just disturbs me that I don't ever see it mentioned as a specific item anywhere. So I wanted to ask you, is that in your perception because the officers feel that it isn't a risk, or simply that somehow it slipped through the net and should be on the risk register?
Well, I think my conclusion would be that it's been considered and not considered to be significant enough a risk at this stage to flag is above what you class as the risk appetite, our level of acceptable risk to get on the strategic risk register. Clearly there will be potential risks around that because there's elements of dependency there, and we can't see the going forward. And I'm sure each time that we do the risk assessment, the review, if you like, and the big one coming for the next one, all areas are considered, and that's considered. HQ was considered as well because it's obviously there was potential for delays there if there was. How would COVID affect the workmen? A different sort of, a different risk, if you like, but the same sort of thing. So in terms of assessment, my understanding is that that's been assessed and at the minute has not been considered to be significant enough to go onto the strategic risk register. I mean, I don't know. Looking at Paul Darby, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Paul, from a senior management perspective or a CMT view.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think so. Councillor Temple and myself have had a discussion about this outside of the cabinet meeting. Also, if you look at the update report that was presented to cabinet on the 10th of February on the commercial update, it does reference that that there's a continual risk assessment around those, and whilst the financial model and the updated financial model would indicate that the surplus that will be achieved across the life of that deal is less than what was originally forecasted. Nevertheless, based on a more prudent or pessimistic set of assumptions around letting of space, that it was still wiping its face and still making a surplus, and it's for that reason that it's not considered to be significant enough to be on the strategic risk register, as Dave has outlined. But clearly there is a period of time to go before it's complete, before the lettings start to be let, and it'll be something that is continually reviewed on a quarterly basis to see how those lettings go and how the financial model changes. I think the anticipation is that the impact of COVID, as it's outlined in the report, would be short term, and that the market would improve as the whole economy would improve, hopefully, once we get through this pandemic. So nothing much further to add to that, Chair, other than to say that that has been considered and is part of the risk assessment process that sits across all of the commercial deals. Not that there are many of them, and there are a small handful of commercial deals that the council has entered into and some lease arrangements, and it's something that we keep under constant review. I guess from a 151 officer perspective, the council isn't overexposed by any of these deals compared to other councils, and our property investment strategy is quite prudent and quite measured in its approach. So, you know, the deals we do enter into are few and far between, and where there is a really strong business case from a regeneration perspective in terms of our covenant unlocking the development to bring what amounts to significant amounts of jobs to the county. The property investment strategy isn't aimed at making a return on those head leases. That isn't the prime aim of them. The prime aim is a regeneration to unlock the development of the sites.
Okay. Owen.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think Paul will mind me saying that he and I don't quite see eye to eye on this question. And really what I'd like as a member of the Audit Committee is to have it minuted that I have concerns. I think the risk is quite different from County Hall. It's about the financial risk, the difference between our committed expenditure and our possible income. And I think it would be it's also out of all proportion to the size of any other investment that I'm aware of in this council. And I therefore think this committee really should be cited on it, and the risk register should reflect that. But I've made my point, Chair, and I'm sure that will make its way into the minutes for future reference.
Thanks, Owen. Okay, David, are you finished? Oh.
Yes, if there's no further questions, yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Bearing in mind the item that Owen has raised, are we happy to accept the progress report within risk management framework across the council?
Move the report, Chairman.
Thank you. Can we move on to item 15, which is the revised risk management policy? And Dave, you're going to do this?
Yeah, each year we have a risk management policy and strategy which is agreed by Audit Committee and renewed, if you like, each year. To be honest, we looked at the review this year. There's no changes, and that's been we had quite a big review, if you recall, about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's been pretty settled since then. But just looking through, if you like, a bit of housekeeping on page 209, there were a few changes that we've made, which really, in many ways, are just reflecting a more accurate thing around. There's no partnership governance framework now. It's run in a different way in terms of partnerships, and we don't actually use the Magic risk management software. We don't use that in the way that we used to use it before. So we've just updated them, but it's really just housekeeping of the policy. The strategy and the policy itself hasn't renewed, and I would recommend to committee that we renew it on the basis of those 2 minor changes. We renew it again for the year 21-22.
Can I ask members if they've got any questions, or they're happy to approve the revised risk management strategy and policy?
Move the report, Chairman.
Thank you. Can we move on to item 16? And can I ask Steve Carter, the Chief Internal Auditor, to come in and present this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Stephen Carter, DCC's Interim Chief Internal Auditor and Corporate Fraud Manager. The purpose of this report is to provide members with information about some recently issued guidance which has been published by SIPFA. And this is in relation to the Head of Internal Audit's annual opinion, and specifically regarding addressing the risk of a limitation of scope. So the guidance recognises that the considerable impact that COVID has had and has raised some questions for internal auditors as to whether they will be able to undertake sufficient work to gain assurance during 2021. So the guidance addresses the importance of an early identification of risks. And I've outlined in paragraph 6 of the report and included for information in Appendix 2 the guidance applicable. It suggests that mitigating actions to be taken now to avoid a limited scope where possible, and also should a limited scope become necessary, some potential wording to be used in the Head of Internal Audit's annual report. So in terms of following on from paragraph 6, within our own arrangements, I have reviewed the guidance to ensure that we are following the recommended practices and adopting an approach that prioritises assurance work and advisory work that will support the annual opinion, also in focusing scopes to examine key risks, and in planning to utilise other sources of assurance. I don't consider that a limitation of scope on the Head of Internal Audit's annual report would be required. As such, I'm happy to take any questions members might have, Chair.
Have members got any questions on this report?
Move the report, Chairman.
Yeah, so the next step, Steve, is that you will be kept informed of any further developments. Okay?
That's right, Chair, yes.
Thanks very much. Can we move on to item 17? Oh, sorry. Ian, you wanted to say something on this?
All right. So just a question on the limited audit reports. Are there any indications yet whether internal audit will need to qualify any reports in this way yet, or is it too early to tell?
No, I don't think that we would be putting any type of qualification in terms of the specific limitation as is expressed in that guidance, no.
Thanks, Ian. Good question. Thank you. Can we move on to item 17, which is the internal audit progress report? And can I ask Steve Carter to present this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to inform members of the work that has been carried out by internal audit during the period April 2020 to December 2021 as part of our 2021 internal audit plan. The table at paragraph 8 provides a summary of the status of audit work undertaken, and also that is further detailed in Appendix 2. A summary of the final audit reports issued in the quarter is presented in Appendix 3, and as at the 31st of December, the service has provided 2,588 productive days. This represents 75% of the total plan. Whilst I see the overall performance of the service as being strong, remote working, and when taken alongside additional testing of core financial systems data and additional assurance work relating to COVID, has had an effect in reducing the overall number of individual audits delivered that would normally be expected. And this has necessitated a prioritisation of coverage. That said, I do expect that coverage, when taken together with other sources of assurance being identified from within services themselves, will be sufficient to be able to issue the opinion as identified within my previous report. Paragraph 16 table sets out the response rate and average score by service grouping for customer satisfaction surveys issued. It shows an overall response rate of 85% and satisfaction score of 4.7 out of 5. Details of the numbers of high and medium priority ranked recommendations that are being raised and those that are overdue by service grouping are presented in Appendix 4, with a summary of the progress made given in the table at paragraph 18. I think it's encouraging to note that of the 825 actions due to be implemented, 771 or 93% have been implemented. Details of actions that are overdue following the agreed original target dates are included in Appendix 6, and they will be considered under Part B of our agenda. There have been no audits finalised in the quarter which have been issued with a limited assurance opinion. As such, I'm happy to take any questions members might have.
Thank you. Bearing in mind that we're going to continue this in Part B, have any members got any questions on this report?
Move the report, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Can we go on to item 18, which is Emergent Internal Audit Plan? And Steve, you're going to present this as well?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to update and engage members of the Audit Committee in the development of the 2021-2022 Internal Audit Plan. So the draft plan is set out for consultation and comment by members of the committee, and the final version will need to be considered and approved by Audit Committee at its meeting in June 2021, and then we'll be monitoring that throughout the year. So in terms of the plan, it has been developed in accordance with the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards. The basis for the preparation of the plan is outlined as in paragraphs 10 and 11, and this has been done with the ultimate aim of enabling the Chief Internal Auditor and Corporate Fraud Manager to form an annual assurance opinion based on the annual programme of risk-based work undertaken. The approach to audit planning in the Council for 2021-22 is outlined in paragraphs 12 and 13, and the key characteristics of the plan are described in paragraphs 14 to 25, and these consider both the impact of COVID-19 and the scale and pace of change, and also the need to be sufficiently flexible to ensure that the assurance provided will cover emerging risks as well as those not yet identified. The plan will also need to be delivered through a combination of different audits and other sources of assurance. So in terms of the plan structure, paragraph 26 details the reviews of what they will consist of, where we're basically using 4 different types of audit activity: key systems work, assurance reviews, advice and consultancy, and grant certification. And we consider this approach to be the most effective way to deliver the strategy for internal audit. So in summary, and as outlined in paragraph 28 within the plan, there's a continued focus on risk-based audits, providing assurance over key systems, and this reflects the need to focus on the management of emerging risks and ensure continued operation of controls within the Council, its governance arrangements, systems and processes. The plan has been compiled to reflect the corporate management team and service group structure within the council as outlined in paragraph 30. So the scale of the plan is set out in paragraph 31, has been developed according to the resources available within it, and allows for a total of 4,126 days as outlined in table 2, the table in paragraph 32. So within this framework, we have developed the emergent plan detailing potential work to be delivered. Consultation is ongoing with the corporate directors, management teams and corporate directors. It is likely that elements of the plan will be changed as part of the overall process of engagement and reconciling the proposed audit work within available resources. As such, I'm happy to take any questions members might have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Have any members got any questions? I can't see any.
Report, Chairman.
I've got Clive Robinson wishes to speak. Clive, you're on mute. Thank you, Clive.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question, really. I appreciate it's a comprehensive view of how the audit team are responding to the changes and looking to put a plan forward that takes us into the next phase of responding to the both the financial challenges and the public health challenges. What's the biggest challenge, Stephen, in terms of delivering this plan, and is there anything that the audit committee can support you with in terms of addressing those challenges?
I think the challenge that we've had, Clive, is mainly in, I suppose it's the unknown element of COVID, how much work needs to be done given extensions and additional grants that are being provided. But in terms of remote working, it is a little bit more difficult. It takes away one of the auditor's key attributes, if you like, just being on site and actually seeing how things operate. So things do take a little bit longer. What I am intending, however, is probably around September time, looking to bring in another apprentice. So just to hopefully, build the team up a little bit, just be able to, to give a bit of extra resource, if you like, to, to actually deliver in the plan.
Okay, thank you. As I say, it's just really a question if there's anything that we can do to help or to unlock any of those challenges, then I suppose the committee would really want to be aware of that and do what we can to respond. So thank you for that, sir.
Thank you, Clive. That we appreciate it.
That's a great question, Clive, because we've got to support them in what we're trying to achieve here. Thanks, Clive. Ian, you want to speak?
All right, yeah, thank you, Chair. Stephen, I was just looking at the table in paragraph 32, and I wondered if it would be useful just to have the previous year's comparisons on there in future, just to get an idea of where the emphasis is changing year by year, so we can see, how the total resource has moved and how you actually using that resource into the different areas.
We could certainly produce that. I think what we would see is in terms of days, it's quite similar. It's slightly less than what we had last year, but in terms of services, our focus, has been around key systems. So resources has a larger allocation. Other services, I would say the actual numbers of days are very much reflective of what we have seen in the past. And in terms of our external clients, they do also thankfully remain fairly constant.
Well, maybe it's just a suggestion for future years when we're looking at this. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Okay. If members are happy to agree the report, that'd be fine, and this will come back for approval in June. Are we all right with that? Item 19, I've got no other business that has been brought to warrant urgent consideration. And item 20 is the exclusion of the public to agree to move into part B. Do we all agree that?
Move the resolution, Chairman.
Thank you. We are now going to move into part B. And can I just wait a few seconds for this, 30 or 40 seconds for the IT broadcaster to do this, and then we'll come back to confirm the recording.